And so they look at it and say, well, this gives me access to equity in my home that I could use tax-free for other real estate properties, other investments, business ideas. I can use it for whatever. Let's jump into our lesson on the board today about a home equity conversion mortgage, or some people will call it a HECM to try to shorten it, but then, like I said last time, that just sounds silly to me. Anyway, so home equity conversion mortgage is the new way to say reverse mortgage. So you have in the industry, if you're talking to a mortgage person, you have forward mortgages, which is going to be the mortgages we talked about last time. You know, traditional, an FHA, conventional, a VA loan, home equity, lines of credit, home equity loans are all forward mortgages, meaning that the mortgage company is giving us money and we make payments back, and as we make payments, the balance goes down. And what a home equity conversion mortgage is they called it a reverse mortgage, because instead of us making a payment to it, they would make a payment to us, and we don't have to make a payment back. And so they called it a reverse mortgage. But because the original first mortgages had maybe a bad reputation, I don't know why they converted it to a home equity conversion mortgage, maybe to just sound more appealing to seniors. But then a common misconception is the only time a home equity conversion mortgage would be needed is in the situation where somebody is asset rich, or they have a lot of value in their home, but they're cash poor. House rich, cash poor, where they don't have access to that cash. I mean, you think about it. Let's say I have my house completely paid off, and who's in the better situation? Person A with their house paid off and their house is worth $1 million, or person B with their house paid off and their house is worth $300,000. You know, from the outside, like we talked about in that quote, or just, I talk about it all the time about, the goal is to be rich, not look rich. And so if I have $1 million home, that looks impressive, but do I have more money because my house is worth $1 million versus the guy that his house is worth $300,000? We both have access to the same amount of money, zero. We both have access to none of it, unless we want to borrow it and pay it back, right? But then also someone would say, well, the guy with the $1 million is in a worse situation because his property taxes are higher. That's true too, right? But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about equity in a home. Equity in a home is not liquid. It's not safe, because it might be worth $1 million today. It could be worth $800,000 in a couple of years, but it could be worth more too. But it's not predictable. It's not accessible. We can't get to the equity just whenever we up and feel like it, even though we spent the last 30 years paying it off, right? And then people call this an investment. Your home is your biggest investment. Really? That pays me nothing? Well, no, but you don't have to make a payment, and so that's like money in your pocket. Well, I'd rather have money in my pocket than not have to make a payment, right? So, home equity conversion mortgage. Basically, here's how they work. First of all, there's a few qualifications in order to qualify for a home equity conversion mortgage. So there's qualifications on forward mortgages and qualifications on home equity conversion mortgages. So the qualifications are a little bit easier as long as you're old enough, because the first one is you have to be 62 years old. You have to be 62 years old, and in some cases, people say, well, what if only one of the spouses is 62 and the other one is 60? Can you still do it? Yes. It's not as favorable, and we don't have time to talk about that today necessarily, but you can do it with only one of them being 62 years old. Okay, next, you have to live in the home that you're doing the home equity conversion mortgage on for at least, I believe, 1 month out of the year. Is what it's not. You don't have to live there and only have one home. I have a client that's a snowbird, has a home in St. George, Utah, has a home in Fairview, Utah. So they just looked at they had both. They looked at the one that was worth the most and did the home equity conversion mortgage on that one. But you do need to live in that home. But really the only way that they want you to prove that, if we're getting really technical, is you have to show proof of address that you're getting mail at that address in your name. Okay? So you have to live there. You have to be able to maintain the property not necessarily, they're making sure that you're fixing the roof, but that somebody is doing it so that the property's not, going to crap. But you have 62, able to maintain it, and then you have to have, and this is just a rough number, but if you're, looking to see if it would be worth it for somebody to do, they have to have somewhere close to 50% equity in the home. 50% equity in the home. Okay? So what happens in a home equity conversion mortgage is exactly that. The equity they convert to a form of payment to the homeowner that they can receive in several different ways, and then it is not required that they make a payment back, but that amount that they're borrowing has an interest rate attached to it. It accrues the interest over time, and then that loan is due when both, if there's two or one in the home, when the person that has the home equity conversion mortgage or the couple, when they both pass away. Okay, so the best way to describe this is just with a story and a picture, because we can see it a little bit better and it makes more sense. Okay, so here's a couple of scenarios to really see this. Is you have, say, a couple that still has a balance on their home. They're in their 60s. Maybe they moved, downsized, whatever, didn't quite have enough equity, but they still owe, say, $100,000 on their home. They owe $100,000, and their payment is $1,200. Okay, that's their payment. The value of the home is, say, $300,000, and so they've got enough equity in the home, right? They're at 33% loan to value because $100,000 is a third of $300,000. Okay, they're old enough, they've got the value in the home, and they still have a payment. Okay, then you have people that owe nothing, and the value is $300,000. So they have no payment. Payment is zero. So if both of these people, see, the calculation is different based on your age. The older you get, the more equity you have access to. So if this couple, say, was 70, and this couple was 63, they have homes that are worth the same or valued the same. This client would have access to more money. Has nothing to do with if they owe on their home or not. It's that they're older and their homes are worth the same. It's not a ton more, but the older they are, the more they have access to. So let's say, for example, they usually can get up to 50% of the value of their home, which is why earlier one of the qualifications is you have 50% equity, because then you have access to the other 50% in a reverse mortgage. Okay, so this is what would happen with example number one. So assuming that this one, because they're a little bit older, they have access to, not exactly 50%, which would be 150. Let's say they have a total, they go to do the reverse mortgage, and this one says, okay, you have access to 160,000, and this one would have 150,000. Okay, a couple of things that have to happen first. The very first thing that comes out, they give you your gross amount that they can qualify for. The first thing that comes out is going to be the fees for the reverse mortgage. Okay, and then the same thing over here. The fees come out, and the fees aren't low, just to be totally honest. You're going to be looking at anywhere in the range of $7,000 to $12,000 to $15,000 for all the fees and a mortgage insurance, upfront mortgage insurance premium, and all these different things. Okay, so the fees come out. Then the next thing that has to come out is any balance that's owed. Any mortgage balance attached to this home must be paid off. You have a home equity line of credit, you have a first mortgage, any mortgage that's attached to this must be paid off. Okay, so they have the 160, the fees come out. Now the next thing that comes out is they must pay off that 100,000. Okay, so that lender is totally satisfied. This payment is not due anymore. But then in financial strategizing with people, that can be a huge, powerful thing for this couple. Let's say that they are just totally strapped, living on Social Security. They've got this $1,200 payment. They need somewhere to live. They can't just sell it and try to rent. They want somewhere that they live in, that they're not going to be, have to move all over the place, where a reverse mortgage could completely eliminate that payment. It would, only leave them, a few $1,000s after that, but they would have no monthly payment anymore. Okay, so that would be their scenario and what they would, mostly benefit from. And so what would happen at the end is they would have paid off their traditional loan. They have $1,200 a month now that they don't have to pay. They still have to pay taxes and insurance, obviously. But now, so basically, I would say about 115,000 of the 160 now is in a interest-bearing loan program. Okay, so this bears interest, but no payment is due. Okay, and so over time, that's just going to get a little bit higher as they go. But when do the owners have to pay it off? Never. Well, who pays it off? Well, we'll talk about that in a second. The government's going to do it. I'm just kidding. So then what happens is they're left with $45,000 that really they can do anything they want with, but keeping in mind that any of that they use is going to add to this loan, but the interesting thing is that the money that comes out of this to use, to spend, to pay off balances is tax-free money because it's considered a loan, and loans are never taxed. Okay? So that's their death, but that would be while they're alive, that's what it would look like. They have a loan that is accruing interest against them. It's not earning interest for them. And then they have access to $45,000 that they could use for improvements on the home. They could use it for really whatever they want. But again, that adds to this. And so if you have somebody that's asset-rich, cash-poor, and they're just strapped month to month, they eliminate a mortgage payment, and they have access to a little bit of money if they need it, but now their fixed income just went higher. That can be a powerful thing for people, especially if they didn't know that was an option. But sometimes they're just concerned about what will happen later. But sometimes they just need to have an explanation of what happens later. Okay, so person number two, they would also be able to get some money through the reverse mortgage. An appraisal has to be done. All those things have to be done. They have $150,000. They subtract out the fees. So let's say they have $135,000 left. The only thing that's accruing interest at that point is that $15,000 that they just wrap in for the fees, and that's accruing interest. Now this is kind of like a line of credit where they don't have to use it. They can just let it sit there and use it as needed, to where you think about it, if they didn't do the reverse mortgage, how much money do they have access to? They have access to nothing. But then they don't have the lien attached to their house. But again, that doesn't have to be paid off until both are have passed on. And what most people do, it ends up where the heirs owe nothing, that nobody owes anything in the way that a lot of people will do it. So there's $135,000 here, and if they wanted to get all of that all at once for any other reason but paying off a mortgage, they can't get to all $135,000 all at once. It's usually split up. At the very most, you can get to two chunks. 1 year they get like $70,000, and the next year they get 65 or whatever that adds up to be. And that's how it would work. Okay, but then anything that they access starts accruing that interest rate that would be then owed later. And so the unique thing too is if they choose the option in the home equity conversion mortgage as a line of credit, then each year this gets bigger, actually. So if at year one they qualify and they have $135,000 sitting there, if they leave it for a year and they don't touch it, then they have access to more. Now they have access to $140,000, and it's usually between 2 and 4% is what this gets. It grows, and they have access to more. And then even if they spend a little bit, this still gets bigger according to that rate that it's earning. So the magic question, well, what happens when they die? I mean, they're just deferring. I mean, I would imagine that loan could get pretty big. because a lot of interest rates are 4 or 5% on the home equity conversion mortgage. So what happens later? Well, when both pass away, if it's a couple, then the home equity conversion mortgage is called due. But because of the type of loan that it is, it's called a non-recourse loan, and you can go look up what that means. It means a couple of things. Non-recourse means that they're never going to go upside down. Well, it means a couple things. But anyway, so this couple passes away, and let's say that the home is worth at that point. So they go into the future. The home is now worth $600,000. And the balance of this reverse mortgage, because it goes up and up and up and up and up each year, is started at 115 and now is at 300,000. Okay, and they die. What would happen? Well, let's say the kids want to buy the house. Well, they've got to pay off the reverse mortgage. Well, do they have to buy it for $600,000 because that's what it's worth? No, they can buy it for $300,000 because that's what's owed. When the couple that had the reverse mortgage passes away, what is due is either the value of the home or the balance of the reverse mortgage, whichever is less. Okay, so if you think about that for a second, what would happen in the inverse if the mortgage was at $300,000, but instead of the house appreciating, it depreciated over time, and the home was worth at the end $250,000. So the value goes down instead. But let's say it gets to the point where it's worth $250,000 in the future, and they owe $300 in the reverse. Are they upside down on paper? Yes. Does that mean the bank's going to come take the house or something like that's going to happen? No. Is that how reverse mortgages used to work way back in the day when the first one came out? Actually, yes. If you go upside down, they'd come take your house. But in this scenario, because of that non-recourse loan, is you get to the end of life, they pass away. This is what, if the kids wanted to keep the home, they would have to pay $250,000 to keep it. Well, what if they didn't want to keep it? What if they have their own homes, which most do, and what if parents' house is far away and they don't want it? Then they can just give it back to the bank and say, well, we were grateful that our parents had access to some money and didn't have to be totally strapped the rest of their life. Yes, we realize we're not going to get the home, but our parents were able to live comfortably. It's only a very selfish child when I meet with them, and a lot of the time I meet with their children when we're going over this, when I bring our mortgage guy in. You get a selfish, well, what does that do to the home when you die? How are we going to split that up, and how am I going to get to take? Here's the deal, children. It's not your home in the first place. It's not your money in the first place. If you even get $5 when your parents die, just be happy about it and go celebrate at McDonald's, right? But it's sad to me how many senior couples are literally living in poverty almost, paycheck to paycheck, struggling like crazy, not able to do what they want to do so that they can leave their kids a whole bunch of money that they didn't work for. It makes zero sense to me. So that's what's owed at the end, is the lesser of the value or what's owed on the home. Okay, and then it would be similar to this. But the thing that's different between this couple and this couple is if they only access this a little bit at a time for things that they need here and there, here and there, here and there, this loan is obviously going to grow a lot slower than this one, because this one required the fees plus the mortgage balance be put on the reverse or the home equity conversion mortgage and start growing, that loan balance getting bigger from that point forward. Where this one, it's just the fees at $10,000, $15,000. And some people, I've had some very wealthy clients that realize their equity is not accessible, that the home equity conversion mortgage is a tool that can be used today. Could they get rid of that? Absolutely. Well, if you already have one, can they come take it away? No. And so they look at it and say, well, this gives me access to equity in my home that I could use tax-free for other real estate properties, other investments, business ideas. I can use it for whatever, where if I don't do this, then that's just money I don't have access to. And even though they don't necessarily need it because they're strapped, it's just money that's dead, sitting there doing nothing, and they want to put it to better use, right? And so they can just write out a check for the fees of 15 grand because they have it in another account. The balance of the reverse is zero, and then every year this line of credit gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and they have access to more and more and more tax-free money that they can just use for whatever they want. And any of the money that they use, they never have to pay it back, and they're able to use it tax-free because it's a loan. I mean, that's kind of powerful if you think about it. But again, you have to be careful that this isn't something that you just go in and, oh, you're 62, oh my gosh, here's a home equity conversion mortgage, and everyone should get one. Okay? It's a tool that needs to be used for the right job, just like any tool. Okay? So, home equity conversion mortgages. Sometimes people are like, man, how the heck do you learn all of that? Well, it's called you meet with lots of people and you try to solve their problems and help them. And you look for every avenue in the financial world, and when you're connected with other people, the mortgage guy that taught me this has been doing mortgages for now, I think, 25 years. And he sat me down and he showed me how it worked and where it's applicable, and now I'm able to go and help people when it's applicable. And it can be a very powerful thing, and have been able to help a lot of people that really, really, really needed this tool. So that is our class for today. We went a little bit over, but that's okay. Hopefully you learned. Thank you for joining us, the Impact School of Money today. Have an awesome day, and class dismissed.